Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas, and today I have with me David Wright, a former actuary, and he's at Acrisure Technology Group, and a fellow podcaster from one of my favorite podcasts, the Not Unreasonable Podcast. David, thank you so much for joining me today. How's it going?
Going awesome, Tony. I'm very happy to get to do this with you finally.
Awesome. So this one's a weird episode in many ways. Number one, we're not here to talk about your insurtech,
Right.
which is what most of my episodes are, right? Number two, I am not home, so I don't have my usual really nice setup. I'm actually at my brother-in-law's lake house in Minnesota, and that's why I have the fake background. And today, what we are talking about is a series of, what are they, essays that you're working on?
Yes.
But before we get there, I do think, so for me, this is really cool because I don't believe you've been on the podcast with me. You are one of the early guests of the podcast back when Nick Lamperli ran it. And I think you were in a couple of episodes. And in one of those episodes, you talked about why carriers and brokers have a very hard time being the same company, right? Because they have different goals. And this, I had been in insurance for like 8 years at this point, and you clarified a point that I had never understood before. And I have since quoted you a whole bunch on it. Basically, you said, carrier's job or the underwriter's job is to avoid false positives, right? They want to prevent writing the wrong business. Failing to write business that you should have written is a lot less painful for a carrier than writing business you shouldn't have. And the broker is the opposite. The broker has, their job is to try to prevent false negatives, right? A broker basically very rarely sees business that they absolutely don't want to write. It's just, how do we find a home for that business? And I thought that was an absolutely brilliant comparison. And then I met you at CAGNY. You were a speaker that year. I think that you're active in CAGNY. That's the Casualty Actuaries of Greater New York. And then I became a fan of the Not Unreasonable Podcast, which is absolutely fantastic. So yeah, for me, like, I'm nerded out to have you as a guest on my version of Profiles. So David, tell me about this set of essays about insurance that you're working on.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for all that, Tony. It's very nice of you. So actuarial training, but before I was an actuary, I was a broker, right? And broking is a discipline of, let's call it, social science. And this is something that at least Nick and I really felt, we agreed on, which is that sales is an underrated thing. And sales is this amazing application of social science of how do you get things done with other people. And I was always fascinated by the concept of the social science of insurance. And the group of essays that you're referring to on my website, notunreasonable.com, is called The Social Science of Insurance. And this has been really triggered by me starting off in the sales role, going to the actuarial role from sales. Totally different world, right? You go for crazy people getting drunk at the party to the nerds with the calculators. And that was a crossing of domains. And I crossed domains again when I went into the technology business. You mentioned Actuary Technology Group, teaming up with a bunch of software providers, trying to understand from my personal journey standpoint, how the heck do you make great software? And why can't people do it? Why is it so hard, right? Another domain again. And I keep coming back to this challenge that insurance presents to efficiency in some weird way, automated efficiency, right? Where there's a lot of people around and they're talking to each other about stuff and they're working out how to solve problems in conversation through relationships. And there's something indestructible about that in insurance. A lot of people have grand ambitions of wiping out the relationship because you can do it all inside of a machine. Won't that be more efficient? You can liberate all these expenses, and that would be marvelous for society. I don't dispute the math. I just dispute the premise of whether that can happen, only because I've had a hard time seeing it happen successfully in a lot of areas. And there are, of course, examples where we have increasing automation, things like auto and the like. But when it gets really tough, people show up again. And so the first essay of the 4 essays is called Underwriters Compete on Moral Judgment. And the concept behind this essay is that what they're trying to figure out, the underwriter, is this a good person? Will this person screw me or not? And that fundamentally is the thing when you talk to great underwriters, and in the reinsurance business, you have this amazing privilege to actually watch, because they're big deals, and you can get a group of extremely effective, intelligent, experienced people being the reinsurance underwriting team. And they get together in a room. You know how they figure out how to do a deal? They talk about it for an hour. That's it. They freaking talk about it. I mentioned this on one of my podcasts, one with Bart Hedges, where the best underwriting teams are highly collaborative with each other. And what are they doing when they're talking? The thing they're talking about is, how am I going to get screwed? And the number one thing that they're trying to not do is get screwed. And it's almost like you get the premium, right? And so you're already making money. And all you got to do is make sure you don't get blown up, which the things that take companies down, at least reinsurance companies, can get a small number of really bad deals. And usually that happens because some customer or group of customers got into that portfolio who are trying to screw you, and screw you they did. And so you have to have this incredibly sharp awareness of, it's like a game theory. It's like it uses a lot of cynical circuitry in your mind. And if you talk to underwriters, and you know this, Tony, right, where you talk, they can be a cynical bunch of people. And that's what they're doing. They're exercising moral judgment. They're saying, is this a good person or not? Are they good people or not? Does the circumstances here facilitate good behavior or not? And the point I'm making fundamentally in that essay, the first essay, is that is what they do. That is how you ask the question, what is underwriting? People have a hard time figuring that out. There's risk management, there's risk consultation, there's classification, there is actuarial analysis. None of these things are underwriting, right? Underwriting is this other thing, which is this deal going to blow up in my face because the people are bad? And that's, to me, a fundamentally moral act.
Whew, that's a lot. That's a lot. So I think it's important for the audience to recognize that your background as a broker was as a reinsurance broker, right?
Yeah.
From the beginning, right? Okay, so as a reinsurance broker, you're playing in really big numbers, right? It's this is not personal auto underwriting. This is not even homeowners. This is not small commercial. This is not middle market. This is not even national accounts. You're underwriting gigantic risks. In fact, so much so that it takes like 5 years to get your authority as a reinsurance underwriter, right? Which career-wise it's problematic, because how do we keep you for long enough if halfway through that process you become valuable and you're tired of not having authority and you decide to go to middle market or whatever, right? So I find it really fascinating. When I was reading the essay, what I found really fascinating at the beginning is how coming from underwriting the biggest risks and going from there to an insurtech that is selling or helping sell very small policies, and how you saw things that were the same. That is crazy to me.
I mean, honestly, Tony, it wasn't supposed to happen.
Exactly.
It's that we have this crazy moment where I'm sitting there so just to give more context for the viewers, listeners, I go from reinsurance actuary broker, right? Real fancy stuff, great. And I hand in my actuarial credential and I get back 50 state licensed health insurance agent, right? And then Google starts the Google app, people go on Google ads, click on the ad, call me. And I had a flip phone, it was hilarious. And then the engineers whirring away, getting all the piping built, so it sort of filter the calls and all that. And I'm the one. eating all these calls for a little period of time. And then we hire a team and all the rest of that. Now, the thing that blew my mind is I'm sitting there, I'm used to selling insurance, well, reinsurance treaties, but it's still insurance to the most sophisticated insurance people on the planet, the people who are literally running, sometimes owning and running insurance companies. Doesn't get any more knowledgeable about insurance in there, right? Let's hope. And then I'm on the phone with a blackjack dealer in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and Sheila. And Sheila's asking me the same questions in the same kind of way. And the thing that Sheila's trying to figure out is, how am I going to figure out a way to make money on this insurance policy? In the end, she did. She lied, perhaps. I'm not sure what she did exactly, but she screwed over the insurance company and made a claim. And that was one of the first few policies that I sold. And I was just astounded. I mean, it took me a while to recover from. I did not understand how to process this. And I do mean it in an intellectual sense. You know, I started reading.
So how yes, I get. How is it possible that Sheila, let's assume she's a college, high school grad, not even a college grad,
right?
How on earth does she outsmart an actuary, a credentialed actuary, on insurance? It's incredible.
Shows that credential's worth. And you know, I joke. Technically, she outsmarted the insurance company, as many cynical insurance carriers will say. The broker's just there to pass it through. I didn't apply too much judgment. Now that said, though, like, you know, there's a lot to this, actually. So one of the pieces that you can touch on here is the distribution channel mattering enormously to the quality of the risk, right? So the underwriting process is what I call like procedurally thick. So you don't just have an underwriter exercising moral judgment. They're choosing to deal with certain distribution sources who themselves has filters, right? Who themselves are sourcing their risks in certain ways. And the way that it works in the best kind of ways is you have an insurance company who says, I like these agents, they give me good business. And the agents say, I like getting referrals from my best customers because they give me good business. What does good business mean? Tony, I say it means they're morally virtuous people, right? And those are people who are not going to screw over the insurance company, who maybe don't care that much about insurance, but anyway, who have exercising values of honesty, of being forthright about what they're doing, of understanding the perspective of the insurance company, recognizing, well, the insurance company is there to make money too, so I'm not going to try and screw them. I don't want to shop my policy too much. I might wind up in bed with the wrong person myself. And so they have this sophisticated understanding of a marketplace, and these are all what I call virtues, and therefore a morally good person. The entire distribution chain has filters at different steps to continue pushing out people that aren't virtuous. And, you know, you made the comment earlier about how there is a certain sense of opposition between underwriters and agents or brokers, right? They're trying to do different things. And in the story I'm telling here, they're actually working together, because nobody wants bad apples, really, right? Because the problems manifest differently. So with an insurance carrier, it means you're going to blow up. That's bad. So we don't want any bad people here. But for an agent, one, you can ruin reputation with insurance carriers if they get too many bad people. They're reliably bad source of business. But two, they're more work for them too. Like, you know, if you're a broker, and I've been a broker with some really tough clients, it is a nightmare. And it's a deal with the devil in some ways, metaphorically, because there's so much work that it's almost not worth it, right? It's your job, you do your job, but man, I hate this client. And how many people who've been in sales positions say that? And those are not customers that really anybody wants. And if you can reliably make a living by filtering those kinds of customers out, you got a good business on your hands. And insurance carriers know it too, and they want to hire those people as well.
I found the graph, the two graphs, very, very interesting. And I've had a hard time getting my head around it. I'm not an actuary. Yeah. I'm a CPCU, and I've been in insurance for 12 years, and I'm a former underwriter, middle market. So you graph profit versus virtue.
Yep.
And basically, once you pass a certain point, which you show the minimum virtue line, right? Which a new economic term, thanks to David Wright. Once you pass the line, profitability declines just exponentially. It's almost a almost a straight down. So tell me about that graph.
Yeah, sure.
What were you really trying to show in those two graphs?
When you look at profitability of insurance policies, you see a lot of graphs that are like this, right? It's an 80-20 sort of rule, right? So most of the losses come from a small number of bad apples, bad deals, bad policies, bad customers, whatever they are, right? And so, the concept I'm trying to get across there is that if you want to try and, but it's a continuous thing, right? So, not everybody is black or white. I shouldn't say it that way. 1 or 0, good or bad. It's not a binary thing. There's a continuum. Some people are a little more likely to do something a little kind of shady once in a while. I'll put my hand up and say once in a while I'll lie about the odd thing. But for the most part, you want to do the right thing, right? And everybody has a different degree of this moral virtue. And some people are incredibly virtuous, much admired by me and others. And some people are incredibly non-virtuous, and those are sleazebags. Many of them eventually go to jail. Now, in between, you got to pick, right? Because you can pick wrong. You can go for only the best, the most virtuous people. A lot of companies are doing that too. And it's easy to underprice good business. You can do that. And you get popped once and you're out, right? On the other hand, you can slug it out amongst the more hyper-competitive against the customers. That is, people are always shopping, always trying to find an in on an insurance carrier, trying to lie, trying to be duplicitous in one way or another. And that's just a different kind of, you can make money on either end of the spectrum. For the most part, though, you can't go too far. So I shouldn't say either end of the spectrum. You can't make money at the very end of the spectrum. There's such a thing as risks that have no price on them because they are trying to actually take your money from you. And, what happens to those people, there are markets of last resort out there. And, I've worked with several of those carriers, been clients of mine, remarkable underwriting shops. And one of them comes to mind is Prime Insurance Company. We can name names here maybe. You go there if you can't go anywhere else. And they're competing against nothing, right? That organization, I did a podcast with the CEO, it's got Henrich Lindsay, a remarkable person. I learned a lot of what I'm talking about here from him. They're trying to figure out, has the world gotten it wrong and you're actually more virtuous than you appear? You got a couple of bad claims, you're actually a decent person, we'll let you in. But if you're what Rick calls a bad partner, you're somebody who is non-virtuous, then you don't deserve it. And oftentimes that means their business goes out of business because they can't get insurance because it's a compulsory purchase, right? So at the very end, those people deserve to fail. Unfortunately, that's the world that they've chosen to live in and conduct themselves into. For every other part of the spectrum, you got to make a call as a company for where you want to play.
Your description of Prime reminded me in a weird way of Sigo Seguros by Nestor Hugo Solari, and how the game they're playing is they're building the first Spanish auto insurance company here in the States to solve the problem of the immigrant community, the Latino community, especially the recent immigrants, who either have a very hard time getting insurance because they're undocumented and don't have a license, or they don't understand what they're buying because they don't speak English well, even if they're here, even if they're second generation and they're here legally. And historically, they have been underwritten with proxies that they have disadvantages on. So basically,
make them look bad.
Exactly, they look like bad risks.
Yep.
But many of them are actually really good risks.
Yep.
And Nestor's thesis basically is, with modern technology and in a Spanish first way, we can actually do non-standard auto in a profitable way where we don't have that problem. Non-standard, a lot of non-standard, basically, for those that have never worked on non-standard, myself included, I've never worked non-standard, but I've read enough about it. Basically, you are charging a broker fee up front and basically assuming that the customer is going to get the insurance card and then cancel the insurance 2 days later. You're not actually providing any sort of coverage, or you're just selling the card for a broker fee. Sure. Right? How do we get that community to to actually keep the insurance, which is what is good for society overall. That's why we have a law that you have to have liability insurance, right? So Hugo's theory is the investor's theory is basically that if we underwrite them better, they end up paying a premium they can actually afford that does reflect their risk properly, and we can pull them out of that non-standard market and bring them to more of a normal market. So it reminded me a lot of that, and yeah, I don't know how to bring it back to the essay, but
oh no, hey, listen, let me tell you how, because that's a wonderful point. It's a phenomenal point, because what you're saying is that you can be poor and virtuous. You can be not English speaking and virtuous. You can look weird or wonderful or whatever and be virtuous. Like, it is not, what I'm not saying here is just because you shop your insurance policy non-virtuous. Absolutely not. I don't mean that one bit. There are certain things which can correlate with non-virtue, perhaps, but it's not a causal relationship at all. And it is very important to say that. There's a client of mine who is a non-standard. So I worked with the non-standard business for several years. And the guy that ran this company used to say, we don't do substandard business. We do non-standard business, which really means minimum limits business. And very specifically, we don't want any of those bums either. They keep, their own proprietary model for figuring this stuff out. They have a database of customers that have maligned them in the past, and they never sell to the same person again that did a bad thing to them. But they have people churning in and out of the portfolio all the time because they're in hard economic times. And, sometimes there's rough lifestyles out there for people, not of their own fault, or maybe it is, but doesn't mean they're not virtuous, and they should still be able to get affordable insurance, right? And that is a critical point. The one of shopping is, the kind of point about shopping is one that frequently kind of can be confusing in this little framework here, because it is the case that, and this is something I saw working with an auto carrier as well, who was trying to be a preferred auto carrier. And what they found, they did the advertising, right? They had the rates, they copied whatever it was, Geico, I don't know, State Farm's rates. And they tried to brand themselves as a preferred auto carrier. What they found that happened was they became a non-standard auto carrier. They couldn't not be a non-standard auto carrier. And they're like, what is going on?
So hold on, I'm going to pause you there. So you can ask me to cut this piece out later if you need to. No. I'm gonna take a wild guess that we are talking about Root.
We are not.
Absolutely. We're not talking,
okay. No, this is a different. Okay. This is from farther longer ago. But I imagine, and I don't know that's the case, but I imagine Root has a similar problem.
I don't know them internally, but I think that's what's happening at Root, where they tried to build a preferred company and they almost accidentally attracted a non-standard clientele.
They did.
So anyway,
and I know why. And I'll tell you why. And the reason why, it's in the essay, and maybe, who knows, you can tell me if you think I could make this point better, but most of the people who are shopping today for insurance are not good customers.
Okay, why is that?
I make the distinction between stocks and flows, right? So if you look at the body of all the insurance policies, let's say auto insurance policies that exist today, most of those customers are good customers. The vast majority, 90, 95, whatever the percentage is going to be. The vast majority of people are decent people. I believe that about the world. I think the insurance data bears it out too. Insurance is a huge industry. Most companies. Now, the people though most people who are good customers are not looking for insurance, right? I've changed insurance carriers once in 10 years because I moved my house, and that was it. I didn't shop. Most people who are decent customers don't actually think about their insurance very much. And that's not causal. That's not what makes them a good customer. That's just it's a correlation. For those who are shopping, consider yourself, if you are a bad apple, right? If you're a non-virtuous person, you're always looking for a new insurance company to screw over. And sometimes you're thwarted and you can't find one, and you're forced to pay these very high insurance rates because you have lots of claims. You're angry about that.
Yeah, we have things like Clue. Right, we have ways to know what claims you've had, even if they were a different carrier, to keep you from being able to just shop around all the time. So why are those things failing? Anyway, sorry for interrupting.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I couldn't tell you. I'm not part of that world, but I do know that what I do know is that the flow of policies that move around the marketplace are non-virtuous people are overrepresented. So let's say they are 5% of the population at large. They're more like 40% of the people who are looking for a policy today.
Yeah,
So
first selection.
if you put your shingle out and you say, come insurance people, buy insurance from you, most people who show up are people you won't like if you get a real cross-section of the population who are looking for insurance today. Only because the people who are non-virtuous are kind of always shopping because they're always looking for a way to squeeze something out of somebody. That's just kind of the people that they are. Again, doesn't mean there are lots of people who are shopping that are perfectly good customers as well. You got to figure out which one's which, and that's the puzzle. Now, if you want to grow fast, you have another problem on your hands because now you got to be like, oh boy, I got to pick up a lot of these people. And now you have this growth pressure, and it's the I think the speed of growth is the thing that forces you to pick up more, more tricky customers. There in the actuarial world anyway. There's this kind of truism or whatever you want to call it, I don't know, rule of thumb, which is that new business runs worse than renewal business.
Yeah,
right? That's another manifestation of this very thing, because you don't know who you got until they get in the door, and then you figure it out.
And that's where a lot of the first generation of insurtechs, the ones that IPO'd, right, the Hippos, Roots, and Lemonades, and two of those companies I have a lot of respect for, but all three of them got themselves in trouble in the same way. They IPO'd too quickly, and they were priced as technology companies, right, and they grew really fast, and it's very hard when you grow really fast to not run really hot loss ratios, right? Freaking Nationwide Insurance took 10 years for NSS, which was their direct writer, to get to profitability. They might have shut it down by now, but it took 10 years, and they had 65 years of experience in insurance prior to that, right? So new books are very, very hard to make profitable.
And my explanation for that is in the essay, right? Where I say that, when you're out there trying to grow, you're going to pick up a lot of people who are flowing around. Right? And those are people that are going to sneak in. They're the non-virtuous.
Okay. I think we've covered most of this essay, but it's maybe 3 or 4 pages if you were to print it out. It's not that long. It is fairly dense.
Yes.
So read it in the morning with your morning coffee and some patience, not last thing on.
Now this is, if I can say a little bit of something about that, that point, and I am unapologetic. This is a serious piece. Actually, this is not designed to be fluff. We won't be find this one on TikTok. The thing is that I had this feeling, which is one of the reasons why I started the podcast, was I felt like if you read the press, you read about insurance, it looks brutal, right? And this is something that always resonated between you, Tony, and me. And I always felt like this is part of the reason why people kind of get a little down on themselves being in the insurance industry. They're like, it's boring, it sucks, these kinds of things. And the thing with me is that contrasted so sharply with the intellectual life I led day to day, which was fascinating for all the reasons.
It's absolutely fascinating.
It is. And so we shouldn't run away from that. One of the things that, and I'm trying to embrace it ever more deeply. On my podcast, like if you're listening to a few episodes, like it's kind of more of this sort of stuff. It's not sugar-coated insurance speak. It's like diving deep with first-rate academics on what they do and trying to understand how insurance interacts with it.
In very interesting ways, you and I both find insurance fascinating, and we've published content that is radically different. Because I publish content that is as digestible as possible, technically accurate, as digestible as possible, and you publish content that is very academic. Both of us with a deep love and respect of insurance, and a deep fascination with insurance. And now you have an actual perspective which I don't have, but yes, we have very different styles. But it's really funny. I love your stuff because it's a lot deeper than mine. And you've communicated when you reached out that you enjoy mine because it helps people see insurance with new eyes rather than
Absolutely. Listen, Tony, one of the things I respect so much about you is that you're so very good at, you're like a man of the people. And I'm not. I'm a ivory tower snob. I don't really like that about myself, but it's just who I am. And I'm never gonna have, tens of thousands of LinkedIn followers or whatever amazing things. And I really respect the promotional machine. And I always have admired that about you.
Thank you.
And I'm jealous of it because I don't have it. I'm doing something different, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I'm kind of trying to break ground on the intellectual landscape
Mm-hmm.
and trying to show people, listen, there's way more depth here than you were told. And it's not necessarily for me to find a way for the masses to
Mm-hmm.
kind of digest that kind of thing. I'm just out there with my machete in the jungle, and there will be people who will be more famous and make more money from these ideas eventually. Wonderful. I'm thrilled about it. And all the power to them. Oh my God, it'd be wonderful if that were the case, because it's just not who I am. I'm a nerd.
I tell new people, especially when a young, I'm gonna turn 40 this year, and when a 22-year-old calls chat with Tony, and we have a conversation, and they're in their first insurance job or they're looking at their first insurance job, and they come across as nerdy, I tell them, and they're like, oh, this stuff is a lot more interesting than I thought in the State Farm call center, right? And I tell them, dig in deep. I quote Rob Galbraith in the domain knowledge never goes out of style. It is very important, even in the insurtech space. And dig in and enjoy it. The rabbit hole goes very, very deep. Like in our industry, it just you cannot learn everything there is to know about insurance, and that is one of the things that I love about it. Every day I learn new things about insurance. Uh, I would I don't know how much you can tell us, how much of a preview you can give us about the yet unpublished, the
Yeah,
next
sure.
three.
No, I totally can. I mean, the ideas are all there, right? So, I'll finish a bit of the story. On my intellectual earthquake, when I found that these customers were the same, I started reading a lot. And I started, I don't know, reading a lot of very old anthropologists, all kinds of crazy stuff. And I finally landed on a set of interlinking ideas. And so I wrote the titles to those essays a few months ago, actually, and I know what I'm going to write in all of them, basically. And they are in ascending order of difficulty and ambition, actually. And so you'd be surprised by me saying that while saying underwriters compete on moral judgment. I mean, I'm accessing intellectual content which is not normally associated with insurance. There's virtue ethics and philosophical ideas in there, and there's like a even more academic version of that thing where I have a lot of citations, and there's real depth to that, and more than happy to have that conversation. Anybody who wants to. The next one is about compulsory insurance, and where I say that all insurance purchases are compelled. And so the concept there is that, legally speaking, most insurance, think of personal auto, it's against the law not to buy personal auto, right? Non-standard people, notwithstanding, we're breaking the law. But for the most part, for the majority of insurance policies, workers' comp, for example, but even amongst the remainder, we might cite life insurance, right? Which is not, strictly speaking, compelled very often. But I would say, no, actually, that's not right, because I don't know about you, Tony, but I'm married. I didn't buy life insurance. My wife bought life insurance. She compelled me to buy life insurance. And so that's kind of one example. And there are many other examples of actually the mechanism of decision for insurance isn't usually one person thinking, I want to buy some insurance. It's actually their social network around them. It's their sometimes it's contractual relationships, business relationships. There's a whole variety of mechanisms of compulsion which are not necessarily legislated, which exist as well. And so I made the intellectual case that there's this concept. Did a podcast with a guy named Joe Henrich, cultural evolution. And what we find in the result of the cultural evolutionary process is a society that forces us to buy more and more insurance because it's a smart thing to do. Unfortunately, we are constrained by cognitive biases that prevent us from making intelligent decisions. You read Kahneman. I did a podcast with Howard Kunreuther, who's the expert on cognitive bias applied to insurance. And basically Howard's point is we got to trick people into buying insurance. And my response to Howard is we already did that generations ago by forcing ourselves to buy it without any tricks. And so we are compelled to buy insurance. That's SA2. You can comment if you'd like. I don't know, Tony, but I can keep going.
Yeah, no. I'm looking forward to read it. I'm going to pause you real quick. You talked about books that you're reading.
Sure.
I highly encourage you to add a bookshelf to notunreasonable.com. What I mean by that, just a list of the books that you've read with a quick, with a short why you enjoyed it and why you think it would be interesting to insurance nerds. We have one of those on insurancenerds.com then you click on resources, then the bookshelf.
Yep.
But ours is very career focused. I mean, we do have some insurance classics, Against the Gods, that kind of thing. But I would love to get some ideas from what you're reading. And I think that a lot of people would enjoy that. By the way, I believe that you recommended at some point the book Finite and Infinite Games. Was that you?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But I do know that book.
Okay.
That would have been my recommendation. I don't think so anyway.
You might have mentioned it in one of the podcast episodes, and I picked it up and really, really enjoyed it. So anyway, keep going with the other two essays.
That's a great suggestion. Thanks, Tony. We'll do that actually. Okay, so the next one, and I think the next one is, I don't know if it's Politics is Risk. Oh, no, it's Insurance. Modern Insurance is Meaningless. And so this is, one of the, back to the point that you and I were connecting over a second ago, which is that people have this sense of, embarrassment about insurance, right? They feel like they've adopted a low status industry as their home. And I felt the same way. Tony, it wasn't right away that I embraced this business. It took me a little while to figure it out for myself before I embrace it. And let me just make a contrast here for you. And I'm just about publishing a clip this weekend on a podcast I released with this gal named Jen Brady, who runs a nonprofit called Oasis, a shelter for women and children in Paterson, New Jersey. Tricky place, remarkably inspirational person and successful person. And there's a point in which she describes a version of some of the things they do. Tony, she's describing a freaking insurance company. Charity, nonprofits, and insurance, if you kind of wrote down, and I'll do for you right now, what they do. They help people in times of need. They source themselves through relationships and filter out people who are bad actors before they're allowed to draw on the resources of the group. That's insurance and that's nonprofits. And those are charities. They're hoping for people to bring them up, giving them financial assistance when they're down.
So basically, they help people when they're in need. That's claims. Yeah. And they filter out those that are abusing. That's underwriting.
Yeah, you got it. Absolutely. And both of them do it. And she does the same thing, right? Why do Oasis is for women and children is because, the men kind of, they screw it up. Anyway, you have to listen to that podcast. I thought it was a remarkable, amazing episode. So we have nonprofits and charities. We feel good if we work for those companies or if we support them or we volunteer our time and energy and money, right, to them. And we go to insurance, same thing, sad face. What gives?
This is right? Amazing. I love that comparison.
Here's the thing. In ancient societies, now we're going back to this cultural evolution idea, right? In ancient societies, we had a compulsion for risk management, which was part of the culture of that society. So this manifests as, let's say, food taboos of certain kinds, right? So you don't eat this when it's full moon. I don't know what food taboos, I have some examples, but I can't come up with them right now just yet because I haven't written this essay yet. But we derived a sense of meaning from the constraints in those societies. And so you find like a lot of the rules of those societies, they feel like they're there for a purpose because they're tied up in a mythology and a way to define our social interactions and hierarchies and all. It's all tied together in one socially knit unit, right? Including tons of risk management, Tony, tons of it. It's all in there. How do you help each other? After a claim, you got to help your villagers with each other, and you all feel good about that, right? Somehow we take all these same processes, we go through the economic development, hyper accelerator to our enormously valuable rich societies today, and we hate it. And it's the same thing. We hate it. right? And the thing that happened was that we disconnected the relationship of the underwriting process, right? So before, it was your friends and family and people you knew were all part of the same, ethnic, cultural unit, right? And we're all tied together in this. And now we have this arm's length society where we're protecting people we've never met, we never will meet. Who knows who they are? Some of them are trying to screw us over. And now we have to institute all these barriers and laws and rules and processes that kind of insulate us from the risk of dealing with distant people. And that unfortunately has drained the meaning from the business, because now you have all these hurdles you got to go over, and you're kind of always feel like, yeah, you're trying to figure out if I'm a bad actor. But back in the ancient societies, that was already, you knew I was a good actor because you knew who I was, right? You think microfinance is an example today where you have these circles of people that they insure each other against default. So when you break away the social relationship, when you go, the group becomes a societal group as opposed to just a kin group. That's when you break the meaning.
So
and insurance becomes meaningless.
This is so interesting because I collect books about insurance company histories.
Okay.
Right. So I've got the one for Nationwide. I've got the one for USAA. I've got all the ones I've been able to get my hands on. Some of which are out of print. Some of which were private prints that the company did, and you have to like find one that fell off the back of a truck kind of thing, or buy it on a estate sale or something. And almost all of them, in one way or another, can be summarized in we insured each other because we knew each other, right? So Nationwide is the one that I'm most familiar with, right? Ohio farmers come together as the Ohio Farm Bureau to insure each other, and because State Farm, which was the Illinois Farm Bureau, because State Farm was punishing us. We're rural farm folk, and you're charging us the same rate as city folk for auto insurance. So instead we come together and create our insurance company, and we know each other, so we trust each other. It's easy to underwrite each other, and yes. The expenses are very low. By the time I come around, 75 years later, and I'm at Nationwide, and I'm reading the book, and I'm like, how did we end up being no longer a cheap provider of insurance, right? And basically the problem is that you get big, and it becomes impossible to underwrite each other. And basically, like, they're all the same story. Geico started as all government employees, right? It stands for Government Employee Insurance Company. USAA with the military thing. The most insurance companies come from an origin story of a group of people who were similar and knew each other and could trust each other, and thus were able to insure each other with very little friction. And then it grows and grows and grows to a point where now you need to spend a lot of resources in underwriting because you no longer know each other.
You do. And let me give you another fact. I'll tell you, every insurance company opposed universal insurance. So when they made liability insurance mandatory, when they made workers' compensation insurance mandatory, when they made health insurance not mandatory, but Medicare became mandatory, and you had the insurance companies administering the health system in the United States. I'm from Canada, different kind of situation there, but they hated it. The insurance companies were like, we don't want this. We don't want it to be, you'd think, well, if you sat back and had your kind of like capitalist monopolist hat on, you're thinking, well, why didn't they want, that's like, everybody has to buy, that's guaranteed customers. Why wouldn't you want that as an insurance company? The reason why is they didn't want to deal with that 5%, Tony, the people I was talking to earlier, those people who are just trying to screw them. Because if it wasn't compulsory, those people just wouldn't buy, probably. And they would deal with the consequences of their life. But we as a society are saying, no, we're protecting them too, right? We're protecting ourselves from them in the case of auto liability insurance. But we have to make it compulsory for everybody. And that includes the dirtbags. And now, Mr. Insurance Company, you have to underwrite the dirtbags and figure out which ones they are. Maybe you put them in a state pool, or you have to sort them for us through this commercial system. And insurance companies hated it because they knew it was going to turn them into something else.
That is fascinating. Around what year was that? Did it vary by state or?
Vary by state. So auto insurance, 60s. Health insurance, I did a podcast with this gal named Christy Ford Chapin on the history of health insurance, highly recommended. That was in the 1920s and 30s. And it was actually the American Medical Association. It was the doctors that wanted to create the health system that we have today, and insurance companies hated it. And then Medicare kind of changed the politics of all that. For workers' compensation, that was like in the teens. There's a paper which I'll put on my reading list for you, Tony, that you're mentioning that, which is how when auto insurance was becoming mandatory, it cites prior debates on workers' compensation and how much the insurance carriers got dragged kicking and screaming into universal workers' compensation. They all hated it because they all knew it was going to lead to a different kind of culture. You ready for the last one?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So the last essay is the most ambitious of all because it's least about insurance. It's called All Politics is Risk Assessment. And, here, what I'm trying to come to, and this is more to my experience in the technology business, when you're trying to come up with strategy or assessing any kind of uncertainty. And the first book that I read that really unlocked a lot of this in my head after that experience of selling health insurance to Sheila was called Risk and Culture by Mary Douglas. And she's an anthropologist. If you've never read anthropologist books before, buckle up. It's kind of wordy. It's a little hard to get through. But I remember sitting in my in-laws' house one summer afternoon, every night after he goes to bed, had a few glasses of wine. I couldn't stop reading this damn book. I highlighted so much of the book that I couldn't export it out of my Kindle. It's in my Kindle because I was like, it's like you're in the desert and you're so thirsty and you find water and you're just drinking so much of it. You vomit, you drink some more, right? That was this book to me, was intellectually this. I was just this thing, the clouds parted. I was like, somebody has explanation for this stuff. And the core idea of hers was that all these weird cultural features you see are there to assess and deal with risk. And the result, so when you're dealing with uncertainty, what you wind up doing is you wind up relying on social decision-making. And social decision-making is a political process. Politics and social decision-making are equivalent terms, which is an interesting point. First of all, it's like, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. That's amazing. And then politics is a constant fight, in her words, about a vision of the future, about a morality. Politics is a moral battleground, which is, again, the frameworks we use for making decisions under uncertainty, but it's a forward-looking moral battleground. So it's about what's going to happen, what kind of future do I want to live in? And political visionaries and entrepreneurs, what they're doing is trying to convince you to follow in their vision of the future and focus on the problems they want you to focus on so that you will try and realize the future that they painted for you and for themselves. So the political entrepreneur is about making you focus on certain risks so that you will eliminate those risks. And that is what brings the vision to be that they want you to be inspired in. So it's the focusing mechanism. What's really good about this is Jordan Peterson, fascinating on this topic of like, how do you actually focus given all the uncertainty of the world? And I say it's a political process, which is a moral process.
Okay. We have gone really long today. So we are recording on August the 12th. The first essay is out. Do we have tentative release dates for essay 2 or 3?
Yeah, well, the second essay, I have it in with a few kind of like close friends of mine who helped me edit the first one. So I probably released that in August. The third one, I've only just started drafting, Insurance is Meaningless. And the fourth one on politics, maybe by the end of the year.
Okay, by the end of the year. Fantastic. David, a real pleasure having you on. I look forward to running to you at some conference or another this year or next, now that we're back on in the real world post-COVID, so to speak. I have no idea how long you think that the 4 essays together will end up being, but this deserves a printed version, a hardcover print, even if it's not long enough to be a traditional book. I believe that it deserves a hardcover, like, nice version, and I would love an autographed copy of I'm happy to buy the book, but I'd love an autographed copy of it. So please do consider. And by the way, Insurance Nerds would be more than happy to publish this.
Sure.
So
let's
anyway.
see, Tony. Let me get this content together, and then we'll get together and we'll cook some plans up over a beer, perhaps.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time. Happy Friday. Have a fantastic weekend.
Thanks a lot. You too.